Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everybody to go and support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast possible. Of course, I'm talking about Mighty Line Floor Tape. If you have issues in your facilities with layout, organization, maybe it's causing safety concerns, Mighty Line has you covered. You can 5S your entire facility without having to paint any of your floors. They have floor marking tape, they have logos. You can make custom signs with your logos. You've got all kinds of floor marking, directional arrows, signs. You want the little footprints on your floor to show people where to walk. They've got that stuff too. They've got grip tape. They've got line tape that is built to withstand forklift traffic. Look, don't take my word for it. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Get a free sample of their floor tape today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Next up, we have Aero Safety. Aero Safety has been a supporter of the podcast for a long time. I've gotten to know Drew Hinton over there at Aero Safety. We've had Drew on several times on the podcast and hope to have him back soon as well. We talk about all kinds of topics that are important to safety managers. One thing that you want to concern yourself with is if you have a need for any kind of support, whether it's written program development, audits, inspections, training for your workers. Aero Safety is going to be the one you want to call. They're going to customize an approach that fits your business needs, not some canned generic training or three-ring binder off the shelf and hand it off to you like it's your own safety program. It's going to be something that is designed specifically based on your needs. Arrow has you covered with all of that stuff. Go to arrowsafetyus.com and get a custom quote today. All right, welcome back to the Safety Pro podcast. We are joined by Heather MacDougall from McDougall Solutions. Heather, how you doing?
Very well. Good to see you and good to be here today.
I hope it's warmer where you are in Florida, I believe, than I am in Ohio. I don't know if it got out of the teens today
Well,
in
it
Ohio.
has been absolutely gorgeous in South Florida, but we just hit a little bit of a.
What a terrible thing to say to to somebody in Ohio
But I was just about to
at
say,
this
but
time
we
of
now
year.
we have a little bit of a cold snap, so it's not quite as nice today. I
Oh,
think the
well,
high was
I have a trip in a couple of
67.
weeks. Yep, I'm heading down to Florida in a couple of weeks. I'll bring some cold with me if
Oh,
you
no, no,
guys
no,
are
no. That's
are
all right. You,
that
you
hard
can
up.
leave that up
Okay.
there.
Awesome. So, Heather, why don't you explain a little bit about your background, your career, and what's led up to what you're doing right now with McDougall Solutions, and kind of set the stage for why we're going to have our discussion today.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've been working on workplace issues for over 25 years, but I wouldn't say that my career has really taken a straight line. I started out as a lawyer, a labor lawyer more specifically. I was representing employers and trade associations, sometimes in the courts of appeal and the Supreme Court on sort of the hot labor and employment issues of the day. And that sort of led me to the opportunity to be counsel at the Occupational Safety and Health Review Commission. So I was there for a little while, then I went back into private practice. At some point, I got the call to join the Review Commission again, but then the next time as a commissioner. And then when President Trump was elected in his first term, I was named the chair, renominated, reconfirmed in the Senate as the chairman of that agency. And then while I was there, I had this opportunity to go to Amazon. So I left the Review Commission and I joined Amazon as its worldwide head of workplace health and safety. And now I'm back kind of doing a blend of all the experiences I've had in my career where I do legal work and I also do more sort of that DC work as well as helping companies just continually improve their health and safety programs. Sometimes it's looking at how to use technology and data. And then I also help some startup companies in terms of technology that's focused in workplace safety.
Nice. Wow. What a background. Man, we could talk for days on all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
So what we're going to talk about today, which was interesting, I'm always thinking about this and talking with colleagues about it, and that is the future of our profession as a safety professional. And let's start off with something. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's a logical place for us to start to have a wider conversation. What do you see fundamentally changing or transforming about what it means to be a safety leader in business today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one that a lot of safety professionals have been talking about for the last few years. And I think it's really accelerated recently for a couple of reasons. But I think, part of that is how AI and digital systems are reshaping um, businesses. It also reshapes how we manage risk. And so a safety leader, a strong safety leader today really needs more than just that traditional compliance and technical expertise. They really have to have fluency more in data. I think also strategic thinking skills are really important, but all of this still has to be tethered to a very human centered leadership. Like, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So
So that's interesting. It's a balance, right? And we've all worked with folks like this, and I can probably, if I'm being honest with myself, I can put myself in a particular category as what kind of safety leader I am or tend to be. Um, and we've seen these leaders, well, safety professionals. I'll just stick with my lane of safety professionals, where they know the reg, they know the numbers, they know the data, but God help us if they ever got out and interacted with people. They're very good at, right, but then we also have the other side where everybody loves them. They're very personable, but they might struggle with some of the tools and technology. I see that as a better position to be in myself because I could always learn the tools or I could always get some help in that area. I've seen people struggle the other direction of trying to be likable, and like it's either, I don't know, if you have it, you have it, and some people struggle with it. But do you see any issues recently, or have you seen any issues recently with sort of the former, the ones that are really smart and they really nail the technology, but they lack what you just mentioned, is it's still a very human, um, profession, people centric profession.
yeah, I think one of the lucky things to answer that question is there's a lot of different types of roles within safety. And it may
Yeah.
depend on how large your team is, how large your organization is, but there is a type of role for either of those, I believe. Some people are going to be better in the field than the floor, engaging. And so you use people in those roles that way. There's going to be others, being able to speak the language to understand how AI systems gather and interpret safety data, and also to know the limitations of that data, right? And how to translate that
Yeah.
data. Like, that's another skill set. So maybe you don't have to have all of them, but I think both are really important. And as a safety leader, we should really work to develop both of those sides of the skill set. So I think, the
Wow,
best the
that's,
best safety
yeah.
leaders are going to understand where they have those gaps. They're going to be able
Yeah.
to engage with people on the front line, to engage with your partners, because those strategic relationships are so important. And then you're also going to have those skills that turn those insights from all of this data into actionable solutions. So it's, understanding how you can continue to develop on both those fronts, I think, is really important in terms of today and where we're going in the future.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, being having the ability to think more strategically than sort of this task oriented. I call it the fable of the hedgehog and the prairie dog, right? The hedgehog is just, nose down, just one task in front of the other, moving from task to task, very short sighted, short term type of outlook. And the prairie dog, you know, pops up every once in a while, looks out on the horizon and sees what's coming or what might be coming and what that means for what we're doing today. And being able to balance those two is key. And we talk a lot about that as safety professionals. So what what do you think in terms of um, tomorrow? Like we talk about that today, but let's jump ahead 5 years. AI. Everyone likes to beat up on AI. AI is like I remember when HD came out, everything was HD. They threw those two letters on everything. You could get an HD hamburger, I think, at one point. Um, so now AI is sort of like the sauce of flavor of the month that is thrown on everything. But the rapid growth and adoption of AI it's insane. So I don't even think we should be thinking 5 years down the road. We should be thinking in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
What do you think that means for safety leaders looking at this
Well,
technology?
I think today, I've thought about this here at the end of 2025. The ways that I have used AI recently are so much different than they were a year ago. Like a lot has happened in this year. And I expect that just will continue to compound over, the next couple of years. So we
Mhm.
have all of these things that we need to learn, but it's also, again, going back to those human-centric tools, like the ability to communicate, these very complex pieces of information in clear, understandable terms across the organization. That's something that I think we all have to do. Whether you're the person who's in the data or you're the person in the field, like being able to communicate this in a way that builds trust. I think that's where we really are in this era. And we've moved beyond that compliance, and we've also moved beyond to some degree, that blame, learning from all this data and the insights rather than the blame. And I think that's another thing that's really important in terms of the development of a strong safety leader. So there's some things that have really changed pretty quickly over the last few years, and I think that's just going to continue to accelerate.
I remember, I still fight it, Heather. I will admit it to this day. Excel spreadsheets. I hate them. I know we need them. I know we have to use them, but darn it, Microsoft, why are you making me learn a whole new language and coding and formulas and everything to just pull out this information I need? But I also know I have to do that. I have to look across, especially if you have large data sets, that you have to look for trends and kind of tell us if we're doing the right thing, if we're heading in the right direction, or where we need to focus our energy. So I see like that's I'm hopeful that we will have much better tools that are easier to use, that are more intuitive, so I can focus on the things that matter rather than, locking the door and spending hours on end trying to pivot and,
Yes.
create charts or
Yeah.
table. So
I,
I'm very
I
hopeful
am
that
so with
that will
you.
free us up to do more people's stuff.
I am so with you because, I've been in large organizations where they had very mature, modern EHS information management systems. But now, sometimes I work with clients that don't have that. And just this week, I've been diving into Excel sheets again and trying to learn some things about like how to get the data out of them. So I am with you. I very much look forward to the day where we have a much simpler way to analyze data and get those insights.
Now you mentioned, shifting from a compliance focus mindset, and I agree. I've often told anybody that's asked me, that are thinking of going into safety and maybe they just started out in safety, and they'll ask me things like, what did I learn over the years, going on like 30 years now, and I said, well, one, I'm still learning. I learn all the time. I talk to people like yourself and learn all the time. But number two is don't convince yourself that your primary role is to know the regulations. That is a function, but it's technical knowledge. They don't change very often. And
They do not.
so once you know the fall, the subpart M, or something, you know it. Then what? You know what I mean? You're not going to run around and just go according to 29 CFR. Nobody wants to listen to that person. Um, but it's the other thing you said is just understand how work gets done. Understand who your customer is, and that safety supports that role. And we can kind of get into this the unicorn that we call a safety culture, this magical safety culture. But I definitely think that this is an opportunity with all this technology. I'm not afraid of it. I'm actually hopeful. um, I've been using something called, and I'm not affiliated with them at all. It's called Consensus. Have you heard
I
of
have
this?
heard of it. I haven't used
Um,
it.
yeah, Yeah, it will read across all like published papers, research
Mm,
papers, medical. So when I'm looking for, hey, has there been any research on? I was looking for something very specific about mobility in the workplace, ergonomics, stretching, warm ups, things like that. And I was looking for research that did not come from the athletic field, that came from either the workplace or just regular life. And I found like three published studies
mm.
on this that didn't come from athletes. I God love athletes. I watch them all the time and I enjoy football. But if I'm getting data from these elite athletes that are just in the prime and top shape, and then I try to extrapolate the results of that research to a workforce that's multiple ages and like it might not work. So Consensus helped find all that stuff. So I'm excited about these
Yeah.
tools and how we can use them.
Thank you for that tip.
Do you have
I'm
any?
gonna go check
Yeah.
that one out because I love that. I mean, I love how you can drop
Yeah.
into some of these tools like two or three articles and say, give me a summary of them. What are some questions I should be asking as a result of reading them? And it's amazing just how quickly it can do that work for you rather than spending hours reading them. So there's a lot of great tools out there that I
Yeah.
think make us smarter and make our work easier.
And that's what I'm looking at is that this is a tool. This isn't replacing anybody. I look at it as, oh, how can we leverage AI? And you mentioned a couple of times with smaller businesses, and I did when I was consulting. I did a lot of work for smaller businesses as well, companies. There's pros and cons, right, to being small. The one thing they'll tell you is limited resources.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know. There's this stuff is the democratization of this technology. I think is going to be uh, a benefit. Not a lot of people talk about the big investments, bigger companies and organizations investing heavily in this. What's going to fall out of that is going to be a set of tools and technology that is more accessible to those smaller companies. They can use AI right now and to look at data and to drop a spreadsheet in and say, hey, tell me, you know, and then whatever question it might have. And so I definitely think smaller businesses that when I first started in safety, that it was always the big red flag. It was, way it's going to be the medium to small businesses that are suffering with safety because they don't have the resources or knowledge. So they get injured the most and they get cited the most. I mean, well, your background in all that. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a myth from like the 90s that I remember, or is that true?
Well, I think it really depends again what's happening within an organization because in a small organization, it can be go either side of that. It can make a company look really good or it can make a company look like a worse performer. In terms of
Yeah.
tech, the stats still show that um, deployment of a lot of these solutions that are out there is still quite low. Whether it's a small company
Mm,
or a large company, and we still have a ways to go in terms of what is currently available today. And I think we could get into a whole conversation about why that is. I think one of the reasons is just having that executive sponsor, like you need that for a lot of this to succeed, to understand how to
yeah.
do a pilot so that a pilot is successful. And a lot of that comes down to, again, that executive sponsor, as well as change management, like how you manage change within an organization and understanding how technology fits into that. It shouldn't just be a procurement decision, which I think a lot of times is how this is treated. Like, oh, this is great, let's just go
Yeah.
do it. But you got to really think through about how are you going to deploy this and make the deployment or the pilot successful within your organization.
Oh man, that's great. And that ties right into, how we can future proof our roles and how we can continue to adapt and evolve as safety professionals. You mentioned, project management, not just program management, but change management, change MOC, and not just the technology behind it and tracking change, but leading an organization through change.
Yeah.
I like the ADCAR acronym. I think it explains sort of the culture that you have to address, rather than just say, "Hey, here's a new thing. Let me know if you have any questions." It's like you skipped a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
You can't just field Field of Dreams, right? I'm going to age myself with that reference. If you build it, they will come. No, they got to understand, why are we building it. They have to get behind that need, and what does it mean for them? How is it going to impact them? How are they going to use it or utilize it? So I think those are skills. I think a lot of safety professionals don't have some of those skills, like
Yeah.
project management
Yeah, I mean, we kind of
and
talked
change
about
management.
some of the skills that strong safety leaders need today. I guess another one I would put in there is how do you shift from that compliance mindset to one of shared um, ownership and business alignment.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you make that shift? And it has to be beyond you as a safety leader. Like, you need to bring your partners along with you for this to really succeed. So, we can talk a bit about like what that looks like. How do you do that
Yeah.
that shift? I mean, I
Yeah, give us a little peek into like how that might work for somebody.
well, I think it starts with moving first beyond being the safety police. Like we can't be that anymore. Like
Yeah.
we can't be the safety police. You have to really become that trusted advisor to all of your different partners. And so you need to think about who they are. And it can be, from operations to engineering, design, construction, robotics, HR, legal. I mean, there's so many out there. Change management, procurement. Like there's all of those trusted partners that you need to really work on those relationships with for all the things that we're being asked to do today to succeed. So I would say one way to do that is have those regular one-on-ones with those leaders, with those partners, learn their goals, learn their constraints, what is their definition of success. And I think of like there's a book that I've read that's called Super Communicators. I think the author's name is
Hmm.
Charles Duhigg, and he explores how people who are super communicators, I think he says they ask like 10 to 20 times the average number of questions. And these are like really questions to understand, to listen, to understand. They're not those kind of questions where like you're just waiting for your turn to speak. You want to look smart. Like these are like really trying to understand. So I think as a safety leader, it's like really getting to know what your operators, your partners are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Like, what are they measuring? And so you need to have that business literacy as well. So it's not just, all of these things that we're talking about that safety leaders need to develop in terms of digital skills and AI. Like, you also really need to understand the language of your business partners, whether that's throughput or quality or cost, whatever it is for them, that's the thing they're measuring every day. Like you need to understand that and then somehow weave safety in terms of a language and metrics into that as well. Like, so it's all one shared business value. And that kind of gets to that, my view is that I don't like talking about safety culture. I like more an organizational culture that values safety because I think, again, you don't want to silo safety. You want it to be all this organization where we have this shared business value and goal around safety. I think decision making is another way that fits into this discussion. And we know that there's research that shows that rarely are SIFs the result of something that's just simply the day of the incident, that it typically occurs from something that happened upstream, choices that were made upstream, sometimes weeks or months before the incident. So, like strengthening decision making, I think is really important for any organization, not just when it comes to safety, but really everything that goes on within an organization. But it's also true for safety. So you have to have a way to have good decision making. And from my Amazon background, I can think of a couple of ways that that's implemented in that organization. The use of white papers, and not every organization is white paper friendly or ready, but I think that's
Yeah.
a great way to make a decision. But there's some other concepts too that Amazon uses in terms of thinking about, is this a type 1 or a type 2 decision? And for your leaders that don't know that, a type 1 is something that's more irreversible. Like once you go through that door, it's difficult to come
Yeah.
back through. So more thought, more analysis needs to go into that. But a lot of decisions are type 2 decisions. And if you wait for all of the
Yeah.
information, it's going to slow you down too much. And nowadays, especially, like bias for action and quickly making decisions. And if you make the wrong decision, you need to pivot anyway. So with a type 2 decision, you move forward and have this process in place that you can revisit the decision, the data, and pivot if necessary from that.
Yeah, man, I shared a post or a video. Um Oddly enough, it was about Tom Cruise. It was a story about Tom Cruise, the actor. And it's a crazy story, but um an actor was on one of the late night shows talking about how he met Tom Cruise and wanted to ask him about this crazy stunt he was doing. And like, how did you come up with that? How did you do that? And Tom Cruise tells the story of like, well, first you go to the safety guy and you tell him what you want to do. And the safety guy says, no, you can't do that. And the actor telling the story says, okay, and then what? And Tom Cruise says, then you go get another safety guy.
I have seen that
So
video.
the
It's a
the
great one.
yeah, and I shared it. I said, like, safety isn't about saying no. It's about a lot of times it's about innovating our way into a yes. It's
Yeah.
about saying, okay, what's the job? That's the job. Okay, let's figure out how we can do that, right? And so I even wrote about it with the whole culture thing. It was bothering me so bad um, that safety isn't about saying no. It's safety isn't why we work. Safety is how we work. It should be like, I love what you said. It's a shared value. It's a core value, um, just like quality, just like customer service. You cannot over-index any one of these other values at the expense of another value. You know what I mean? You can't have that imbalance. You have to be
Yeah.
really good at all of them. And so safety professionals, sometimes we get siloed and we get to thinking like, I've got to get them to understand me, my pain, and what I got to deal with. And we kind of drag everybody kicking and screaming over to safety world and learn our
Yeah.
language and talk like we do. And no, it's the other way. I've got to go. And I love that what you said about asking a lot of questions, and I have to understand what it is they have to do, because it's okay to say that the job is job one. That's why we're here. But how we do it matters, from quality, from, safety, from, frugality. All of those matter. And so I think once, as a safety professional, once I understood, oh, I know why I'm here. I can help make sure that that goes efficiently. I can make sure that we can do that again tomorrow, repeatable, in a repeatable fashion. I can make sure that we keep costs down. I can make sure that we don't have turnover, at least as it relates to, you know, poor working conditions and, injuries and illnesses and things like that. I play a role in the success of this business,
Yeah.
but I make no mistake that the business exists for a very specific reason. And I just need to figure out where I get fit into that, and we're off to the races.
Yeah, I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes when there is a no, it's because we as safety professionals haven't done all of our job. Like they have questions, they have concerns. So we need to address those. Oftentimes it's with data. It could be with change
Yeah.
management. So it's how it fits in with the business. So sometimes that's the issue, is just working with your partners to get to that yes. If it's still a
Yeah.
no, let it be their no. Like that's, I think, where again this partnership comes into play, is this shared ownership and this strategic plan that really has to be developed together. It's where the organization is going and how it measures success. And again, all those cross-functional collaborations. So those are all those partners and teams that bring together their voice to create that strategic plan. So it's not simply you
Yeah.
asking them. I don't really like that dynamic where it's like they're our customer,
Yeah.
like, because it shouldn't be that way either. It shouldn't be like we have to get yes from, dad. It should be, again, this like the
Partners.
the partners, and we've come to this plan together. And
Yeah.
that's why I love like the work of coming up with a strategic plan on at least an annual basis, because you've done a lot of that hard work already. Like you've said, this is what 2026 is going to look like. This is our strategic plan. And from there, I think goal setting becomes much easier because you've already set out like what's going to be accomplished. And now you need the goals that tie the performance, the measurement of that, the goals to the plan. So make sure that you then move into the next phase, which I would say is that, that SMART framework for setting goals. That again, it's not just
Yeah.
safety owning them. Like you need to make sure that across your organization that you have owners, that RACI, who is owning what part of the work that needs to be done to deliver on that goal.
Yeah, and then you've repositioned yourself from this sort of gatekeeper of technical knowledge, like regs, where
Mm-hmm.
people make a decision and cook something up, and then they come to you and go, "Hey, can we do this?" And well, that's an easy answer, no, because of this, and yes, and really, it's about it's performance based. It should be more performance based. Okay, well, I see that you have a thing you have to do or want to do. Here's where we what we can't violate or we can't do, so let's figure out how we're going to do that. So you kind of get off of that yes no, that kind of that toll gate, and you get into this whole performance based approach of let's figure out how we can still pull this off. And then there's where the ideas come in, where maybe there's somebody else comes up with another idea of doing it, that is quote unquote in compliance. But yeah, I think you're right. It's easy for us to get stuck in that position sometimes as safety professionals.
Yeah, and
Is that like looking at the reg and saying you can't do that?
I mean, I think we saw a lot of the goodness of that in action during the pandemic, and I think it really elevated us as safety professionals from that time because we had everybody coming together at the table to talk about protecting our people and how we were going to do that. And it was amazing to see different teams coming up with solutions. They weren't things that were just coming from the safety team. Sometimes they were, but there were a
Yeah.
lot of really innovative ways that engineering teams, software teams, were coming up with solutions. And that's, I think, like, again, what you really want to see is you together come up with this strategy, um, and it brings everyone together in terms of what their piece of the puzzle is, like, what their skill set is to deliver on it. And in that strategic plan, you've set that all out. And so then you have these goals. And then I think budgeting becomes easier too. If you've done all that work up front, budgeting is really just kind of an outcome of those decisions that have already been made. You have to fund the the strategy, rather than again just sort of asking for something and having them say no or hoping they say yes. So
Yeah.
I believe all of that kind of flows together, and then you have at the end of that, you have then the monitoring, the learning. So again, it's that just cycle of continuous improvement and that follow through.
Yeah, and then I think that's where we kind of, as most safety professionals, understand that part, like of just watching, monitoring, reporting, observing, and reporting. I say, but yeah, iterating. Looking
Yeah.
for opportunities to pivot where we need to, or or go all in an area that's working and say, oh, that's doing what we thought it was going to do. Let's see if we can replicate it in other areas. And then you start over again with a small scale test or something like that.
But I
Do
would
you,
say,
are you, go ahead.
I was
Mhm.
going to say, I think that a lot of organizations are good at having that monitoring and that learning and the review. But I think sometimes they miss again who's doing that. So again, back to
Mm,
those, strategic partners, they should really be a part of that, whether it might be a different team at the weekly business review level, but there should be MBRs and QBRs, and you should have your key stakeholders, your ops partners, HR, legal, all of again these teams that came together to build strategic plan. Like all of those people should be a part of those reviews, that cadence as well. It shouldn't just be again like flipped back to safety, because again, if you run into any roadblocks, you want it to be shared success or, share dealing with something that's keeping you from being green on the goal.
yeah. 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 Absolutely. And that, man, we just keep coming back to this whole, we are a member of the team, a part of a team that has to work together. And we all have weight to pull. Um, and I like that. It's a much easier job, I guess, if you could say that, job, right? To have that approach rather than feeling like, oh gosh, who's going to come to me next with their problem, right? Being on the team, a member of the team, and sharing that decision making and getting input from others. It's just, I don't say easier job, but man, it's just more fulfilling. I know
Yeah.
that it's more enjoyable. And who doesn't like to enjoy their work, right?
Yeah. I think you can do a lot more if that's the dynamic that you have in your organization.
Yeah. So what do you think safety professionals, and I know I'm just kind of throwing this out there to you, based on your experience, especially with on the legal side and seeing cases dealing with companies, but do you think there are enough development resources for safety professionals today?
I think there's a lot of great ones out there.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm on the board of ASSP, so I'm familiar with many of the resources they have. And sometimes you need to sort of dig a little bit to find like what at your place in your journey of your career you need. And there are different things at different levels, but there's a lot out there. And even, some of these things that we've been talking about around AI and digital skills, like
Yeah.
there's a lot out there that doesn't matter if you're a safety professional or in HR or marketing or wherever you are. Like there's so much out there. Go to LinkedIn and there's, classes
Yeah.
available there. So I think there are a lot of things out there for those that are looking. And sometimes it just would be helpful, I think, for safety professionals to understand like where should they go to look for their stage in their career and their needs.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to what we talked about earlier about, how can we future proof our role? Um, and that's one is like, you've got to own your career development. Like nobody's going to give it to you. So you will have to kind of think outside the box and go, okay, I went to safety school and got my degree
Mhm.
but this wasn't covered. Like, well, they can't cover everything. You have to own your continued development, and um, I will make sure to look for some resources as well to share in our community here as well. ASSP being one, that's one I was thinking of. I know a lot of folks, fellow professionals that are involved in ASSP. I really like the focus that they have in some of their program with some of their programs, especially for like
Yeah.
supervisor safety training and things like that,
I mean, that organization, that's
which
their
is great.
focus is about the safety
Yeah,
professional. They advocate for the safety professional and try to deliver what their members need, which is a little bit different
yeah,
than some of the other organizations out there, which are great. But, the ASSP is really about the safety professional member.
great. And again, I'm not affiliated with them, in any official capacity, but if I were to line up annual conferences, because you know that the season comes around where you're like, okay, which conference am I going to go to? ASSP is up there, top two. I love. I have a soft spot in my heart, a special place in my heart for VPP. So I
Mm.
did a bunch of work with OSHA and the VPP, and in my past, and so I really love it. I even love it as a benchmark if you're just going to use it as a benchmark to improve. So their annual conference is really good, but yeah, that's the thing is I I guess I am going to go back to the hedgehog and the prairie dog. The hedgehog is somebody gets into an organization and they blink and it's 10 years have gone by and they haven't been active in their community, their professional community at all. And I think that's a mistake. I
Yeah.
think that you have to keep a kind of a finger on the pulse of what the your profession at large is doing outside your organ. I don't care if you're in the largest organization on the planet or the smallest. You've gotta keep your eyes and ears out there. And organizations like ASSP, that's a great example of you get to take a break and get out of the office and see what others are talking about and doing. And do you see that being something that should be considered in a strategic plan, like within an organization? Hey, how are we making some of these external resources available to our professionals, not even just safety professionals, but others?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes two ways. I mean, one, I think it's the development of the safety professional. And there's a lot of great organizations out there in addition to the one that I mentioned. And many of them
Yep.
have these sort of roundtable groups, benchmarking groups where you come together on whatever cadence it is. But that I think is something that benefits the organization beyond your own development is the ability to bring issues to those meetings. Some are virtual, some are
Yep.
in person. You can find, I think, ones that match like what your organization is willing to sponsor. But to be able to bring those questions and maybe even something you weren't even really thinking about, but to understand what other organizations are doing, whether it's on SIF prevention, technology, different types of indicators, lagging and leading. There's a lot of great conversations that are going on out there. Again, many of these organizations are looking at safety in this lens of beyond compliance, because the compliance part was really based on OSHA and the OSH Act, which is now
Yeah.
50 years old. And many of those
Yeah.
regulations are 40, 50 years old. And it's
Yeah.
very hard to update, to promulgate, to change a regulation, to bring it back. Like that process, the rulemaking process on average takes years. So a
Mhm.
lot of the work that we're doing isn't based on compliance. It's again just knowing that compliance is kind of the floor, but most
Yeah.
organizations are reaching for that ceiling. We're building the walls beyond that floor. And how do you do that? How do you continually improve? So to have these other resources, I think helps you move beyond sort of that baseline and to think about not only what your organization is doing, but what others are as well that takes you beyond just compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Um, all right. Look, I we could talk forever, but I know your time is valuable, and so let's wrap this up. Uh, in general, you know, high level thoughts of the future of safety as a profession,
Mm.
going into the next several years. What do you think?
Well, if I had to summarize it, it would probably be like, how do we become systems thinkers? Because everything, again, back to the conversation we've been having today, everything is so connected. And our
Yeah.
choices and our priorities need to reflect that. So, how do we do that? How do we become systems thinkers and recognize that, we have all these interconnected processes, human and organizational factors are part of it. We have to integrate safety goals with business goals. We need to be adaptive and resilient organizations more than ever. Um, we have to
Yeah.
be collaborative problem solving. So, like, again, all of these things just show that everything is connected. We need to think in systems, and it's becoming much more complex. Like it was easier when we just had the OSH Act and we were just talking about compliance. And even that,
Yeah.
people underestimate the complexity of the regulations. Like you said, like once you learn them, you learn them. But that's kind of if you're in like a little niche. Like there's a lot of regulations
Yeah.
out there. So if you're in a complex organization, I don't know every regulation. I'm frequently, pulling them back up again and refreshing myself on
Same.
all the details
Yeah.
in it. So, like, our jobs are becoming much more complex. And so we have to think about, how do we do this work and how do we move forward together?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Heather, thank you so much for joining me on the Safety Pro podcast. Great conversation. And where can folks learn more about your organization and what you do?
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I'm a little disappointed I'm not your 200th guest. I saw that mark is coming up soon. So congratulations to you on that. That's a really great accomplishment. So you should be proud of yourself for that.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Creeping up on that 200th.
yeah.
Yes.
But if people want to learn more about me, I have a website, McDougallSolutions.com. I also have a LinkedIn newsletter that I send out every couple of weeks. And
Yes.
so LinkedIn or my website, either place, good to go. And I would appreciate it. But
I
thank
get your
you.
LinkedIn newsletters, and that's where I saw an article on that you wrote about the voluntary protection program, the outreach program that OSHA has, which I would love to pick your brain about sometime. Maybe we do another episode on that program. But I love that program. I always thought it was great, and
Yeah.
I got to know OSHA a lot more as a safety professional, having partnered with them.
And they're
There's
doing
that word
great
again.
things too in terms of trying
Yeah.
to move beyond compliance. Like they are looking
Right.
at ways, along with OSHA, but how do we modernize BPP?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of great work going on within OSHA and the BPP program and association as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Heather. And
Thank
I
you.
look forward to continued conversations.
Great. Thanks.